This is Jim Cantelon Today Television. This is Bible Study for the 21st century. So friends, it's hard to believe, but we're actually finished Matthew and Mark. It's taken us, a couple years, maybe a bit more. And it's appropriate that at this Christmas season, we're starting with the Christmas narrative in Luke. Luke is an amazing book, and I'll be talking about that in a few minutes' time. But to think that Christmas is so quickly upon us is frankly very thrilling. I look forward to talking about it in just a few moments' time. A few years ago, I woke up in the middle of the night with a sentence on my brain. Once upon a time, in a village far away, there was a shepherd boy who sang for the angels. I was so taken aback by this, I went to my desk, wrote it down, and the next day went back to it, and guess what? A Christmas story emerged. It's called The Boy Who Sang for the Angels. It's a Christmas story, and I'd like to send it to you as a Christmas gift. I so appreciate your support of JCT and WOW. It means all the world to us, and I hope at this Christmas time, this book can mean a lot to you. Here's how you can get it. So friends, Luke is a remarkable book. I have always enjoyed Luke. For one thing, he's not an eyewitness like Matthew, Mark, and John were to the life of Jesus. Luke is an historian. He's someone who is doing what we call primary research. He's interviewing people who knew Jesus personally. He's interviewing family members. He's interviewing the apostles. He's talking to people whose lives were changed by their contact with Jesus and his ministry. And so he writes this very, very fascinating account. Now, you know that for the last few years, I've been offering you little tranches of Cantelon's Casual Commentary for Matthew and Mark, and a lot of you have them out there now. But what I've been doing all along is staying way ahead, and I've actually completed the entire Cantelon's Casual Commentary, Matthew, Mark, Luke, Acts, I'll tell you about that in a minute, and John. And it's going to be coming out in book form very, very soon. And once it's ready for you to get your copy, I'll be letting you know in advance. But just know now it's on its way. So I'm not going to be providing you the little tranches anymore. The book in its entirety will soon be available to you, both through our program and also through various internet providers. In the book, I write a fairly extensive introduction to Luke. And I want to read just a few paragraphs from my book before I get into just extemporaneous commentary. When we refer to the four Gospels, we rarely, if ever, think in terms of the third Gospel, Luke, as a two-part work. But it is. The Gospel of Luke was written by a guy that Paul calls the beloved physician, because Luke was a physician. He's a Gentile, not a Jew. He's a Gentile from Alexandria, and he's writing to a certain Theophilus. He doesn't tell us who Theophilus is or any of his history. It's just Theophilus, most excellent Theophilus. And this excellent or excellency adjective was something that was given to high-ranking officials. So we don't know. There's speculation about where Theophilus may have been serving, Rome as a high-ranking official, but nevertheless, that's who the guy is, all right? And it's a history that Luke is writing for him. We don't know if Theophilus commissioned Luke to do this, or whether he and Luke were good friends, or whatever the reason, he writes it for him. And it's an extensive 2-part treatise comprising 1/4 of the New Testament. Think about that. 1/4 of the New Testament. It's larger in volume than all of St. Paul's epistles and the book of Hebrews combined. What's more, it's beautifully written. It's been referred to as a master work in the art of Greek composition. Can you believe that? Some commentator called him a superb artist with the pen. It's a page turner. There's no doubt about it. Luke is a page turner. Others have deemed it the most beautiful book ever written, which of course is high praise indeed. Luke's purpose, however, was not style, but substance. He wanted to document the rise of Christianity in Israel, and that's the Gospel of Luke, and it spread to the Mediterranean basin and to Europe, and that's the book of Acts. So as I said off the top, Luke is really a 2-part work. You have the Gospel of Luke and you have the book of Acts, and they're a part of the same composition for this most excellent Theophilus. And so with the scrupulous rigor of an historian, he attempts to demonstrate the legitimacy of this new faith and this peace-loving, tax-paying, emperor-respecting people called people of the way, eventually called Christians. He's basically trying to emphasize that Rome should not feel threatened by Jesus. He's no insurrectionist. He also wanted to encourage Theophilus and the Roman authorities to be as lenient and protective of Christianity as they were of all of the religious sects in the empire at that time. And anything other than the secularist, emperor worship of Rome was seen as a sect. Indeed, he wanted Rome to see Christianity as a world religion. In other words, something of stature, and of course it's ably demonstrated as a world religion in Acts chapter 2 on the day of Pentecost. He just wanted them to not be seeing Christianity as merely a Jewish Gentile mystery group, of which there were many, in Luke's day. Okay, now enough of the introduction from my book. I'll get now into the extemporaneous comments, but suffice it to say that the rise of Christianity in Israel is the concern of the Gospel of Luke. The spread to the Mediterranean basin in Europe is the concern of the book of Acts. And as I say, it's referred to as the most beautiful book ever written. Okay, enough said there. Let's look at Luke chapter 1, all right? Inasmuch as many have taken in hand to set in order a narrative of those things which have been fulfilled among us, just as those who from the beginning were eyewitnesses and ministers of the word delivered them to us, it seemed good to me also, having had perfect understanding of all things from the very first, to write you an orderly account, most excellent Theophilus, that you may know the certainty of those things in which you were instructed. Now, let's just quickly analyze what Luke says there in that very long first sentence. First of all, he's talking about things fulfilled among us. Things fulfilled among us, is an interesting reference to, let me just underline this, things which have been fulfilled among, it's an interesting reference to the historic life of Jesus. It's not a case of some fantasy. It's not something that has been invented or, created by some religious mystic. These are things which have been fulfilled. In other words, this is no expression of somebody's dream. This is something that actually happened, all right? It's historical. Just as those who from the beginning were eyewitnesses, okay? There's another emphasis on the historicity, if you will, of the account he's about to give. And having had perfect understanding of all things from the very first. In other words, I have thoroughly investigated this, Theophilus. This is not some spurious work. I have really done my due diligence, if you will. And I've written you an orderly account, all right? An orderly account meaning that I have kept to the rigors of historical narrative. This is something that you can trust, most excellent Theophilus, so much so that you may know the certainty of those things in which you hang on here, I'll just do this, those in which you were instructed, okay? So the fact that Theophilus has been instructed suggests that it may have been his curiosity that spurred Luke to write this history. I think that's probably the case. Theophilus had shown interest. And it wasn't just Theophilus. There were so many Romans, going right back to the centurion when Jesus was crucified, surely this was the Son of God. I mean, Jesus' life was so absolutely not just radical, but earth-shaking and profound, and so unlike any other life that had ever been lived, that there was more than a modicum of curiosity out there in the Roman world, in the Gentile world, let alone, in Jerusalem proper and among the citizens of Judea. So this is how he's setting it up. It's an introduction to both Luke and Acts, eyewitness accounts, primary research by Luke, and it's what we have heard, as John puts it in 1 John 1, which we have seen, which we have looked upon, and which we have touched. In other words, this is historical rigor. This is something that has been very orderly in its being studied and put down on parchment. It's something, Theophilus, that you can trust. Now, if Theophilus can trust it, then you and I can trust it. I really, I think in the Lord's plan to have someone from the outside, like Luke, as an historian, with his primary research and his obvious, intellectual and writing skills, to have someone like him tell us about Jesus rather than some of the eyewitnesses just adds another layer of credibility, if you will, to the Gospels. That's not to say that Matthew, Mark, and John, were collaborating, by no means, although Luke and Mark and John were, and Matthew for that matter, have some common sources, obviously, from their own eyewitness experiences, but also perhaps Matthew and Luke even relating to Mark's account, because Mark was the first one to put his thoughts on paper. Actually, it's Peter's thoughts. I mentioned that to you before. Mark was basically seen as being mentored by Peter, and Peter at one point in his own writings refers to Mark as his son. And so Mark's gospel is like Peter's reminiscences of the life of Jesus. But we've dealt with that in the past, so I won't go there now. But the point being that there is commonality with Matthew, Mark, and Luke. They're called the synoptic gospels because they do have some common sense of continuity, but it's not something they've ganged up, and collaborated on. Each of them has their own perspective. But Luke's is unique in that he is not Jewish. He was not a part of the apostles. He did not follow Jesus, through the Galilee. He did not personally witness the miracles of healing and of deliverance. He's writing as an objective historian. And that, to me, gives it great value. And we'll get into the text itself right after this break.
The Bible tells us that true religion is visiting orphans and widows in their distress. The Bible also says that God is a father to the fatherless and a defender of widows. Heaven's core values for mankind begin with God's heart for the least of these. When you support WOW, you're in the sweet spot of God's heart for the poor. Yes, we're only a small player in this great drama, but at least we're on the field. Please give generously.
So let's get right into Luke's narrative now, beginning with verse 5 of Luke chapter 1. There was in the days of Herod, the king of Judea, a certain priest named Zacharias of the division of Abijah, or the Hebrews would say Aviyah. His wife was of the daughters of Aaron. Her name was Elizabeth, and they were both righteous before God, walking in all the commandments and ordinances of the Lord, blameless. But they had no child, because Elizabeth was barren, and they were both well advanced in years. So it was that while he was serving as priest before God, in the order of his division, according to the custom of the priesthood, his lot fell to burn incense when he went into the temple of the Lord. And the whole multitude of the people was praying outside at the hour of incense. Then an angel of the Lord appeared to him standing on the right side of the altar of incense. When Zacharias saw him, he was troubled, and fear fell upon him. The angel said to him, "Do not be afraid, Zacharias, for your prayer is heard, and your wife Elizabeth will bear you a son, and you shall call his name John. And you will have joy and gladness, and many will rejoice at his birth. For he will be great in the sight of the Lord, and shall drink neither wine nor strong drink. He'll also be filled with the Holy Spirit, even from his mother's womb. And he will turn many of the children of Israel to the Lord their God. He will also go before him in the spirit and power of Elijah, to turn the hearts of the fathers to the children, and the disobedient to the wisdom of the just, to make ready a people prepared for the Lord." And Zacharias said to the angel, "How shall I know this? For I am an old man. My wife is well advanced in years." And the angel answered and said to him, "I am Gabriel, who stands in the presence of God, and was sent to speak to you and bring you these glad tidings. But behold, you will be mute and not able to speak until the day these things take place, because you did not believe my words, which will be fulfilled in their own time." Now, this is absolutely fascinating, and I'm just going to take my time with this. Jewish priests were divided into 4 divisions, and for those of you who are interested in doing some of the back study, 1 Chronicles chapter 24, 1 Chronicles chapter 24, verses 1 to 19, describes these 24 divisions. What Chronicles tells us is that these priests served in the temple in cyclical intervals throughout the year. So, it wasn't like they were full-time there on site. They were full-time priests, but they were on site in a kind of a rhythm, a kind of a cycle of various of these 24 divisions. Zachariah, or Zacharias, belonged to, as we see in verse 5, the division of Abijah, which, according to 1 Chronicles chapter 24, was the 8th division of priests. And we also know from this verse that Elizabeth, his wife, was also of priestly descent. She was of the daughters of Aaron. Now, Aaron, of course, was Moses' brother, and he was the first priest, the first appointed priest of Israel's history. So that's the setup here. So you've got an elderly priest who is under the division of Abijah, one of 24 divisions of priests who take their turns throughout the course of the year in a cyclical kind of way, doing the priestly duties at the temple. That's what we have here. Now, Herod the Great died in 4 BC, 4 years before Christ. So John and Jesus were born probably a little bit before that date. That's the assumption that Bible scholars have had to make. We see in verse 6 that Zacharias and Elizabeth were blameless, or righteous before God. And what that means is that they weren't perfect, but it means that they were very strict adherents to the law of Moses. Now, when we think of the law of Moses, we tend to think in terms of the 10 Commandments, and rightly so. The 10 Commandments are kind of the ultimate précis, if you will, of 613 laws that comprise the law of Moses. Many of those 613 laws referred to the time of wilderness wanderings. Some of them have to do with hygiene. Some of them have to do with eating. And some of them have to do with Sabbath or Shabbat observance. But that which applied even to the time of Jesus from those laws, Elizabeth and Zacharias were strict adherents to that, and as committed to the law of Moses, they were declared righteous. In verses 8 to 10, we read that Zechariah, like all priests of the various divisions, was called to service in the temple, but not guaranteed of any specific task. It fell to him by lot, the Bible tells us. In other words, they had some random way of picking names and assigning those names to various priestly duties in the temple area. In this case, he was in verse 9 it says, his lot fell to burn incense on this occasion. Now, burning incense was a high honor for any priest. And keep in mind, he was one of the sort of the go-to guys in the priestly world. You had the high priest, the Sadducees, they were the elite priestly caste, if you will, who managed and ran and operated the temple and the temple economy. They were like high, placed officials. But then beneath them were these divisions of priests. So, Zacharias is one of, 24 divisions of Abijah. He would be a lowly priest in that sense, but at the same time, it could fall to him or any other of these lowly priests the remarkable honor of burning incense in the holy place. Now, the holy place, I don't want to get ahead of myself here, but it was right next to the veiled entry to the Holy of Holies. So the holy place, which was an enclosed area just before the Holy of Holies, where the high priest went in only once a year on the Day of Atonement to make atonement for the sins of the nation, this was a very, very sacred place. And it could very well be that Zechariah had never been there before. He would be in awe of this. And of course, not only would he be in awe of it, but he was in there alone, all by himself. And he's burning incense at the altar of incense. And that in itself was a remarkable thing because it was so small. We're told it was 1 by 1 cubits square. Now, a cubit is the length from your elbow to the tip of your middle finger, okay? Roughly about 18 inches. That's a cubit. Now, there was something called the royal cubit, which was that plus another 2 inches, about 20 inches. And usually when you're reading about the cubit measurements of the temple, it's the royal cubit rather than just the pedestrian cubit. The royal cubit would be right up to about there, all right? So, but generally speaking, when you read about a cubit in the scripture, think in terms of 1.5 feet. So if something is 20 cubits tall, that means it's 30 feet tall. 1.5 times 20, right? It's not too hard to remember that, 18 inches. And he's there with this little altar of incense, 1 by 1 cubit square, okay? And 2 cubits high, this plus that, so that's what, 3 feet? 3 feet high? And then it had 4 horns at each corner, and this would be a kind of a protrusion from each corner that would kind of bend out from each corner, and it was called a horn of the altar, if you will. And it was all overlaid with gold. A beautiful, beautiful thing. And this incense that Zacharias was burning was fragrant. It symbolized, if you will, the presence of God. So, there he is, all by himself. The lot has fallen to him to burn incense. He's there in that holy, holy place, right next to the Holy of Holies. Wow, what a spot. A place of profound reverence and solitude. And while he's there, the people are outside the temple compound of the holy place and the entrance to the Holy of Holies. They're further out, and they're gathered there because this is a very significant moment, as it is every day, to receive the blessing of the priest when he comes out from burning the incense. But while he's still in there all by himself, in verse 11, an angel of the Lord appears beside the altar of incense. Doesn't describe the angel in terms of how he looked. It just, he's there. And when you're reading this, you remember, if you have any exposure to the Old Testament scriptures, it's similar in appearance, similar in the appearance to Manoah, Samson's wife with regard to the conception of Samson, and also the appearance to Mary. We'll get to that in a moment. But this was a very remarkable birth narrative, as it's sometimes referred to. So there is fear. Why wouldn't there be? Wouldn't you be afraid? I would be. And Gabriel says to him, fear not. And he tells him that he's going to have a son, and the son's name is to be to John, which I think means God is gracious, or something like that. All right. And he says he'll be filled with the Holy Spirit from the womb, ministering in the spirit and power of Elijah, a prophet and forerunner of the Messiah. I mean, wow, this is an amazing description of someone who hasn't even been conceived yet. But Gabriel, he speaks from the Lord, and he knows exactly what he's talking about. And this is the message to Zechariah. Now, Zechariah's reaction and the follow up to that, we'll get to the next time. I'll be back right after this.
Why dance when you have very little? When you live from day to day with food insecurity, rampant disease, sickness, and death? You dance because your heart is full of love for God and your hope is strong. WOW has come alongside as the hands and feet of the Lord, providing both home-based care and assurance of God's love. You're happy and you've got to dance. Please support WOW. Let's keep them dancing.
Now, this Christmas narrative just gets better and better, and I'm looking forward to the next few weeks as we unfold this story from the first few chapters of Luke. But friends, remember as you enter into the Christmas season that this is a tremendous time to, if you will, reread the narrative in Luke 1 and 2 and take time with it. I'm taking time with it. In fact, I'm going as slowly as I can possibly go, and at the same time meet some of the time constraints of a television program. But I hope that you're encouraged and inspired by our study together. And remember, you can be encouraged and inspired by supporting orphans and widows through our ministry called WOW, Working for Orphans and Widows. It's a huge ministry, having a huge impact, especially during this COVID-19 era. And especially at this time, year end, it really makes a difference. When you support WOW, you're supporting JCT, you're supporting JCT, you're supporting WOW. We're one and the same ministry. Look forward to our next time together. Until then, bye for now.